I don't play co-op games anymore. I haven't. Not since the winter I bought a sealed copy of a game that was never supposed to exist. And I know how that sounds. I know how every story like this sounds. But before you click away, I need you to understand something. I'm not telling this for views. I'm not telling this because I think it's a good story. I'm telling this because somewhere, on a hard drive I no longer own, there is a save file with my name on it. And as of last week, someone is still playing it. Let me start from the beginning. My name doesn't matter, but for the sake of the story, call me Mark. I'm 34. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment about an hour outside of Pittsburgh. I work from home. I don't have a lot of friends, and the closest thing I have to a hobby is collecting old games, specifically original Xbox titles from the early 2000s. The clunky ones. The ones with the dark green cases and the chrome jewel on the front. I'm not a streamer. I'm not a YouTuber. I'm just a guy who likes the way those games feel. There's a weight to them. A grain. A loneliness. Almost like every one of them was made by people who didn't know if anyone would ever play them. I find most of my collection at estate sales. That's where this started. It was a cold Saturday in February, the kind where the sky is the color of an old television set and the wind smells like wet metal. The sale was in a town I'd never heard of. One of those little places that only shows up on the map if you zoom all the way in. The house belonged to a woman in her 60s who had passed away the month before. No husband, no kids, just rooms full of unopened things, like she'd been collecting them for someone who never showed up. In the back of a closet, behind a stack of romance novels, I found a milk crate full of video games. Most of them were common. A few PS2 sports titles, a copy of Halo 2, the usual. But near the bottom, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag, was a sealed Xbox case with no cover art. Just a plain white sleeve. And written on it, in black permanent marker, was a single word. HOLLOWVEIN. I'd never heard of it. I've been collecting for 12 years. I've memorized release schedules, canceled projects, regional exclusives. HOLLOWVEIN didn't ring any bell at all. But when I tilted the case toward the light, I could see the disc inside through the plastic. And on the disc, scratched in with a needle or a pin, was a second word. Bailey. I paid $2 for it. The woman running the sale didn't even look at me. She just took the bill, dropped it in a coffee can, and said, "He used to play that one a lot. Before." I asked her what she meant by before. She didn't answer. She just turned around and started folding sweaters. I drove home with the case on the passenger seat. And I'll tell you something strange, something I didn't think much of at the time. The whole drive back, about 40 minutes, I kept feeling like the case was warmer than it should be, like it had been sitting on a heater. I touched it once at a red light, and it was room temperature. But the feeling didn't go away. It was the kind of warmth you feel when someone has just gotten out of a chair you're about to sit in. I got home, fed the cat, and set the case on my desk. I didn't open it that night. I'm not sure why. I just didn't. I opened it the next morning, with a cup of coffee in my hand and the sun coming through the blinds in long, slow stripes. The disc was clean except for the name. Bailey. The handwriting was neat. Careful. The kind of careful you only see when someone really wants you to read it. I popped it into my old Xbox, the original one, the big black brick I keep hooked up to a CRT TV in the corner of my living room. The console made the sound it always makes, that little mechanical sigh, and the screen went dark. Then the title card came up. HOLLOWVEIN. The font was wrong. That was the first thing I noticed. It looked like the font that early 2000s budget horror games used, the kind of cheap, jagged serif that was supposed to feel like dripping blood, but mostly just looked like Microsoft Word at 3 in the morning. The menu was simple. New game. Continue. Options. And underneath those, in smaller text, a fourth option. Join. I'd never seen a single-player horror game with a join option. Not from 2003. Not from any year, really. Co-op horror wasn't really a thing until much later. I clicked on it anyway, because curiosity is the reason most stories like this exist. The screen went black. And then a line of text appeared, white on black, like an old DOS prompt. Welcome back. I hadn't entered a name. I hadn't created a profile. The game hadn't asked for anything. Welcome back. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I backed out, hit new game, and started over. The opening was beautiful, in a sad sort of way. You played a man in a long coat walking down a coastal road, somewhere in what looked like New England. The fog was thick. The water was gray. The textures were exactly what you'd expect from 2003, muddy, low resolution, with that specific kind of bloom lighting that made everything look slightly wet. The music was a single piano note, held for a long time, then another, then another. It felt like a funeral. You walked. That was it. For the first 10 minutes, you just walked. And then you saw her. She was standing on a wooden pier, looking out at the water. Long coat, dark hair, her back to you. The game didn't tell you who she was. There was no marker over her head, no quest indicator. She was just there, the way real people are there. You could walk past her. You could ignore her. You could turn around and go back the way you came. I walked up to her. She turned. The character model was good. Too good for 2003. Her face had the kind of detail you only started seeing on the 360 generation. Small asymmetries, freckles, a little scar above her left eyebrow. She looked at my character. She smiled. And then a text box appeared at the bottom of the screen. You came. That was all it said. There was no dialogue option. No response prompt. I waited. The text just sat there, blinking. Then it changed. I was hoping you would, Mark. I'm going to ask you to do something. I'm going to ask you to put yourself in that moment with me. You're sitting on your couch, alone, on a Sunday morning. The coffee in your hand has gone cold. The sun is in your eyes. And a game from 2003. A game you bought for $2 from a dead woman's closet. Just used your real first name. I hadn't entered it. I hadn't typed it anywhere. The Xbox didn't have a profile system that would know my name. I stood up. I walked over to the console. I checked the cable. I checked the disc. I even checked the back of the TV, like maybe somehow a webcam had appeared back there overnight. Nothing. Just dust and old wiring. I sat back down. The text was still there. I was hoping you would, Mark. I picked up the controller. I pressed A. The text changed. My name is Bailey. I'll show you the way. I want to be clear about something, because I know how this sounds. I am not a person who believes in things. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in cursed objects. I have spent 12 years buying old games, and I have never once encountered anything that couldn't be explained by a glitch, a bad disc, or a developer with a sense of humor. When I saw my name on that screen, my first thought wasn't this is supernatural. My first thought was this is a really good ARG, and someone went to a lot of trouble. So I kept playing. That was my mistake. Bailey led me off the path almost immediately. The main road continued north along the coast, but Bailey turned east, toward a thin trail that wound up into the trees. I followed her. The game let me. There was no invisible wall, no warning prompt, no "are you sure" dialogue. The trail just kept going. And as we walked, she talked. She asked me how my morning was. She asked if I'd had breakfast. She asked if the coffee was any good. Each question came as a text box, and each one waited for me to press a before continuing. It felt less like a game and more like a slow, patient conversation with someone who had all the time in the world. I told myself it was scripted. Of course it was scripted. The questions were generic. Anyone could be reading them and feel like they were being addressed personally. That's how horoscopes work. That's how cold reading works. I knew this. I knew it the way you know the floor is solid until the moment it isn't. Then she said, "Your mother liked the gray cardigan, didn't she? The one with the buttons." I stopped playing. I sat there, controller in my hands, and I stared at the screen until the screensaver kicked in. My mother had passed away 4 years ago. She had been buried in a gray cardigan with pearl buttons. I had picked it out myself. I had never told anyone. Not a friend. Not a coworker. Not the cat. It wasn't the kind of detail you share. It was the kind of detail you keep, because keeping it is the only thing left to do. I turned the Xbox off. I went outside. I walked around the block twice. The wind was cold, and the sky had that gray weight to it, and I tried very hard to convince myself I had misread the text. When I came back inside, the TV was still on. The Xbox was still on, and the text box was still on the screen. Take your time, Mark. I'll wait. I should have thrown it out. I want you to know that I know this. I should have taken the disc, snapped it in half, dropped it in a dumpster 3 towns over, and never thought about it again. That would have been the correct move. That would have been the move a sane person makes. But I'm a collector, and collectors have a sickness. We don't throw things away. We investigate. So that night, I did what any of us would do. I went online. I searched HOLLOWVEIN. I searched HOLLOWVEIN Xbox. I searched HOLLOWVEIN Bailey. I searched canceled Xbox Horror 2003. Nothing. Not a single forum post. Not a single Reddit thread. Not a single low-resolution screenshot on an abandoned game FAQs page. For a game I was actively playing, HOLLOWVEIN did not exist anywhere on the internet. Except for one place. Deep in the comments section of a YouTube video about canceled survival horror games, someone had written, for years ago, "What about HOLLOWVEIN? My brother had a beta copy. He stopped playing it after he met the girl." The comment had no replies. The account had been deleted. I sat in the dark for a long time after I read that. The next afternoon, I went back in. I told myself I was just going to look. Just see what else the game had to show me. I'd grown up on these kinds of stories. The ones where someone finds a haunted cartridge and ignores all the warnings. I always thought those people were idiots. But sitting there in my living room, with the gray light coming through the blinds, I finally understood them. It's not bravery that makes you keep playing. It's not even curiosity. It's politeness. The game is offering you something. It feels rude to refuse. Bailey was waiting on the trail, exactly where I'd left her. She didn't mention the cardigan again. She didn't mention anything personal at all that day. She just walked, and I walked behind her, and the trail wound deeper into the woods. The fog thickened. The piano notes came further apart. Somewhere off-screen, a wind chime made a sound that no real wind chime makes. A single low tone, like a finger dragged across a wet glass. We came to a clearing. In the clearing was a carnival. It shouldn't have been there. The geography didn't allow for it. We had been walking uphill for what felt like an hour of in-game time, deep into a coastal forest, and somehow the trees had opened onto a stretch of flat grass with rides on it. There was a Ferris wheel turning slowly against the gray sky. There was a tilt-a-whirl. There was a row of game booths with their tarps half collapsed. The whole thing looked like it had been built 50 years ago and forgotten the next morning. Bailey turned to me. "You're going to love this part." There was no one in the carnival. No NPCs. No carnies. No families. No children. Just the rides, moving on their own. The Ferris wheel turned. The tilt-a-whirl spun. The carousel played a tinny, broken song. Bailey walked through it all like she owned it, and I followed her, because at this point I didn't know what else to do. We came to a small wooden chapel at the far end of the carnival. It didn't belong there either. Carnivals don't have chapels. The doors were open. Inside, I could see candles burning. Actual flickering particle effects, which for 2003 was almost impressive. Bailey stopped at the doorway. "Not yet," she said. "You're not ready yet." And then the screen faded to black, and the game saved automatically, and I was kicked back out to the dashboard without warning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the chapel, about the way she said not yet, about the yet part, specifically. Yet implies a later. Yet implies that the door will open, eventually, and that someone or something will be waiting on the other side of it. Around 3 in the morning, I got up to get a glass of water. The TV was on. I'm going to repeat that, because I want you to hear it. The TV was on. The Xbox was on. The disc was still inside. And on the screen, in white text on black, was a single line. "Are you coming back, Mark?" I unplugged the console. I unplugged the TV. I unplugged the surge protector. I sat on the couch in the dark, with a glass of water shaking in my hand, and I did not sleep for the rest of the night. In the morning, I did something I should have done from the start. I called the woman who'd run the estate sale. It took me a while to track down her number. The house had belonged to a woman named Edith Mayer, and Edith had a niece who'd handled the sale. The niece picked up on the third ring. I told her I'd bought a game from her aunt's house, and that I had some questions about who had owned it. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, long enough that I thought we'd been disconnected. Then she said, very quietly, "Was it the one with the name on it?" I told her yes. She told me her cousin had owned it. Edith's son. He had been 23 when he disappeared, sometime in late 2003. He had been a quiet kid, a gamer. He had bought a game from a guy at a flea market a few weeks before he went missing, and according to Edith, he had become obsessed with it. He stopped going to work. He stopped eating regular meals. He stopped answering the door. The last time Edith saw him, he was sitting on the couch in front of the TV, and he told her, without turning around, that he had met someone in the game who understood him. A week later, he was gone. His car was still in the driveway. His wallet was still on the dresser. The game was still in the console, paused on a save screen that read, in white text, "Waiting for player 2. Edith had kept the disc for 21 years. She had never been able to bring herself to throw it out. I asked the niece what her cousin's name was. She said, "Michael," but he went by Mark. I want you to understand what I felt at that moment. It wasn't fear exactly. Fear is sharper than that. What I felt was something slower, something older. It was the feeling of standing in a doorway and realizing that the room on the other side has been waiting for you longer than you've been alive. The disc didn't have my name on it because the game knew me. It had my name on it because the last player had been a Mark II. And somewhere in whatever logic the game ran on, that was enough. I was a replacement. I should have stopped. I keep saying that. I should have stopped. But by then, something had shifted. I wasn't curious anymore. I was angry. I had been chosen by a piece of plastic, sight unseen, for a role I had never auditioned for. And I wanted to know what the role was. So I went back in. The save file loaded me right outside the chapel. Bailey was waiting on the steps. She looked up at me, and for the first time, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Her character model was slightly different than it had been the day before. The freckles were in slightly different places. The scar above her eyebrow was a little smaller. It was as if the game were rendering her from memory, and the memory was imperfect. "You came back," she said. "I wasn't sure you would." I didn't have a way to respond. The game still didn't have a dialogue system. But I noticed something else then. When I pressed the X button, a button that had done nothing the entire game, a single word appeared at the bottom of the screen. "Speak." I pressed it. A small text field appeared. A cursor blinked in it. The game was letting me type. "I want to tell you that I typed something brave. I want to tell you that I told her to leave me alone, that I knew what she was, that I wouldn't be the next Michael. But I didn't." I sat there with my hands hovering over the keyboard I'd dug out of a drawer, and after a long moment, I typed 4 words. "Who are you, really?" The cursor blinked. Bailey's character model tilted her head, very slightly, in a way that no NPC from 2003 should have been able to do. And then she answered, "I'm the one who stays." That was the midpoint. That was the moment everything I thought I understood about the game broke apart and rearranged itself into something worse. Because while Bailey was speaking, the camera in the game did something strange. It pulled back, just for a frame, half a second, maybe less. And in that half second, I saw the inside of the chapel through the open door behind her. The chapel was full of people, not NPCs, not generic crowd models. Real, individual character models, each one different from the next. A man in a baseball cap, a woman in a yellow raincoat, a teenage boy with a backpack, an old man holding a fishing rod. They were standing in rows, like a congregation, and they were all facing the door. They were all looking out at me, and every single one of them had a name floating above their head. Michael, David, Sarah, Jonathan, Ellen, Chris, Mark. There were dozens of them, maybe 100. The camera snapped back to Bailey before I could count. She smiled. "They came too," she said. "They all came. And they all stayed." I tried to back away from the chapel. The character moved, but the camera didn't follow. Instead, the camera stayed fixed on Bailey, and my character walked backward into the carnival, into the rides, into the fog, and then the camera cut, and I was standing right next to her again, at the foot of the chapel steps. I tried again. Same result. I tried to quit to the dashboard. The pause menu didn't open. I pressed the Xbox button. I pressed it again. I held it down. The console didn't respond. The little green ring on the front of the console wasn't even lit anymore, but the game was still running. The screen was still on. Bailey was still smiling. "You're getting tired," she said. "It's almost time. I'm going to tell you what I did next, and I want you to know that I'm not proud of it. I'm not telling you this to make myself sound brave. I'm telling you because it didn't work, and I think the not working is the part that matters." I got up. I walked over to the Xbox. I picked it up off the entertainment center, and I carried it out the front door of my apartment, down the stairs, into the parking lot. I set it on the pavement behind my car. I got in the car, and I backed over it. I felt the crunch through the steering wheel. I heard the plastic shatter. I pulled forward and backed over it again, and then a third time, until the only thing left was a fan of cracked black plastic and a few twisted bits of green circuit board scattered across the asphalt. I went back upstairs. The TV was still on. The game was still running. Bailey was still standing at the foot of the chapel steps. The disc was sitting in a plastic ring on the pavement 2 stories below me, and the game was still running. And the text box at the bottom of the screen had changed. That wasn't very polite, Mark. I want to be honest about what happened next, because the truth is, I don't remember all of it clearly. I think I sat down. I think I cried a little. I think I called my friend Daniel, who lives in Ohio, and tried to explain what was happening, and I think he told me to come stay with him for a few days. I don't remember packing. I remember getting in the car. I remember the drive being very long and very quiet, and I remember that for the first 100 miles, my phone didn't get any signal at all, which had never happened before on that stretch of highway. I stayed with Daniel for a week. I didn't tell him everything. I told him I'd been having a rough time and needed to get out of my apartment. He didn't ask too many questions. Daniel is good like that. On the 7th day, I drove home. When I walked into my apartment, the TV was off. The Xbox was, of course, gone. I'd left the wreckage of it in the parking lot, and someone had cleaned it up while I was away, probably the building super. The CRT screen was dark. The cat was fine. Everything was exactly the way I had left it. Almost. On my desk, next to my laptop, was the disc. The same disc. The plain silver one with Bailey scratched into it. Sitting there, in the middle of my desk, like I'd just brought it home from the estate sale. There was no Xbox to play it in. I had made sure of that. I picked the disc up. It was warm. The way it had been warm in the car on the way home, 100 years ago, the day I bought it. I took it outside. I put it in the dumpster behind the building. I put a bag of trash on top of it. I went back upstairs. I locked the door. I am writing this, recording this, I guess, since you're listening to it, about 3 months after that day. The disc has not come back. As far as I know, it's been hauled to a landfill somewhere outside the city, buried under a few tons of other people's garbage. I haven't bought another Xbox. I haven't bought another game. I've started selling my collection on eBay, one disc at a time, and the apartment feels lighter every time another box leaves it. But I'm not going to tell you the story ends there. I wish it did. I really do. 2 weeks ago, my phone buzzed in the middle of the night. I was asleep on the couch. I don't sleep in the bedroom anymore, because the bedroom has a TV in it, and I don't trust televisions the way I used to. The buzz woke me up. It was a text message. From a number I didn't recognize. No area code I'd ever seen. It said, "You left the carnival early." I didn't reply. I didn't screenshot it. I deleted it, and I blocked the number, and I put the phone face down on the coffee table, and I lay there with my eyes open until the sun came up. Last week, I got another one. The chapel door is still open, Mark. I deleted that one too. And then, 3 nights ago, I got the last one. The one that made me decide to record this. The one that made me think that maybe, if I told someone, anyone, what had happened, the weight of it would get a little lighter. That maybe if enough people knew her name, she wouldn't be able to use it on anyone else. The text said, "There's a new disc at the estate sale this Saturday. Don't come." It was signed, for the first time, with a name. Michael. I don't know who sent those messages. I don't know if it was the same person, or a different one, or no person at all. I don't know if Michael is still out there, somewhere, trying to warn the next Mark before it's too late, or if it's something pretending to be him, baiting me into one more drive down one more empty road. I don't know what Bailey is. I never did. But I'll tell you what I know now, and then I'll let you go. There is a game out there called HOLLOWVEIN. It was never released. It is not in any database. It is not on any list. It exists only on a handful of unmarked discs that move quietly from one estate sale to the next, from one collector to another, always finding their way into the hands of people who live alone, who like old things, who have lost someone, who would be polite enough to keep playing when the girl on the screen says their name. If you ever find one, if you ever see a plain white case in the back of a closet with a single word written on it in black marker, I want you to do something for me. Don't open it. Don't be polite. Don't tell yourself it's just a glitch, or just an ARG, or just a piece of plastic that can't possibly know anything about you. Tell yourself the truth instead. Tell yourself that some games were not made to be played. Some games were made to play you. And somewhere, in a foggy little town that doesn't exist, in a chapel at the edge of a carnival that shouldn't be there, there is a girl in a long coat who is very, very patient. She has been waiting for you for a long time, and she will wait a little longer. Just don't make her wait too long.